What's up, everyone? Today we're going to be reacting to this currently live debate. I'm a little late to the party. I've listened to a little bit and I was like, what better way to go through this debate, share our thoughts, break it down, than to do it live as it's happening? So I have not fully watched this. I am about, I think, maybe an hour in. So actually, no, I'm actually about 39 minutes in. So not an hour in, but I want to get right into this because there's already been some super interesting points. This is from the Tim Pool podcast. I believe it's called, the Culture War with Tim Pool. So this is essentially a platform where Tim will have people of different, we'll say, ideological thoughts. In this case, we're going to be here. Let me get the title in here. Discussing specifically religion, and the prompt is Catholics are the superior Christians, comma debate. So that's the title. For some reason, it's hard to show both here in Restream. But I want to play this. I'll probably let a good amount play, and if I see a need to pause it and give some thoughts, I'll do that. But I think these are good conversations amongst Christians to have. Although I'm not someone that's, um, you know, promoting quarrelsome behavior or quarreling over theological differences 24/7. I do think that there's certain conversations that just need to be had. So on this panel, I know we have Jay Dyer. Shout out to him. He is an Eastern Orthodox Christian. The other guest I know is, let's see who we got. We got Tim Gordon, who is defending Catholicism. So he's a Roman Catholic. And then Aiden Mattis is the Protestant on this panel. I believe that he is an Anglican or Methodist. Well, I guess specifically a Methodist, he mentioned. But yeah, we'll see. Let's get into this. Let's get it.
Not the superior one true church. They are a group of Christians in their genuine best effort attempting to follow counsel.
I'm going to go back a little bit just so we're not starting in the middle of a prior
The
conversation.
power of universal binding and loosing, which is why you would appeal to a pope to excommunicate the second in charge of the church. You have to tell me how.
And that's why a council can excommunicate the pope. Because the council's above the pope. I just read you the
Pope
acts.
is above any individual bishop. The bishops are above the pope.
The acts of the council say Vigilius was excommunicated. Your translation of your people say he was.
I would like to hear from you guys. What about the arguments you've made or believe makes your denomination superior in the true sense of the word superior? Are you saying that it's because you're right, you're correct, or is there something about your belief that inherently better serves the people and God?
Just to be very clear, the Anglican Catholic position, and by extension,
I don't know why, but I think it's funny after that question. The Anglican is the first to speak up.
Methodist position, because Methodists are Anglicans, is that the Methodist Church, the Anglican Church, all of them, they're not the superior one true church. They are a group of Christians in their genuine best effort attempting to follow Christ in the most
if you're granting that another church is quote unquote superior, assuming that the metric is the closeness and oneness to the true church that Christ established, why would you not want to be a part of that church?
proper way possible, using the 7 ecumenical councils, using the 7 sacraments. We are Catholic up until the end of the 11th century.
Why? So, what happened then?
We began to disagree with the Pope. It's a long process. The Reformation did not happen in 1517.
In the 11th century, a Pope came in who was saying stuff that was like way wrong.
I would argue it started with Gregory VII, probably, with the Dictatus Papae and him coming out, and because of a literal political situation. This was not.
So his argument, or I guess what he's saying, is that Anglicans, what he is now a Methodist, which is a branch of Anglican, that they accepted the Pope up until the 11th century. And then I guess all of a sudden he stood behind certain dogmatic principles where Anglicans stood up and said, hey, no, we're going to break off and create our own church. I'm asking because he's definitely here right now to answer that question. Let's see what he says.
Not a theological issue. This is a political issue.
I have a question for you. You're an Anglican, then do you agree with the branch theory?
Anglican Catholic. I
Do you
don't
agree with the branch
Can
theory?
you elaborate on the branch theory?
It's the typical Anglican idea that the church is split amongst a bunch of different branches.
I think that would probably
Okay.
line
Do
up.
you think that any of the people
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying. And I mean, that really is the only answer to the question that I was referring to. That from his worldview, since he's even saying, "Oh, quote unquote," the Anglican view is not necessarily superior. Um, he clearly believes that the church, the body of Christ, is just split among a bunch of different denominations and beliefs, which we know just isn't the case. The truth should be never changing.
who compose the documents and the
I think that would probably.
I'm just going back a little bit because I want everyone to hear Jay's question.
line
Do you
up.
think that any of the people who composed the documents and the canons at the 7 ecumenical councils believe that the church was divided amongst a bunch of different sects?
I don't. Well, I mean, the answer.
He's Orthodox now.
Even Tim called him out. He didn't even know what to say. So Jay asks him at these ecumenical councils where like the canon of scripture that Anglicans and all Christians use, were any of them Anglican? Were they split amongst all the bishops, all the episcopates getting together? Were they split amongst a bunch of different denominations? Were there 7,000 plus Protestant denominations at this ecumenical council that determined the canon? No. We know it was all one true body, the one true church of Jesus Christ. And then just in simply asking that question, you can see he's just like, he's shocked. It's like something he hasn't fathomed before. But again, for me personally, coming from a Protestant background, like I totally get it. We're told certain things. We're told sola scriptura as truth. We're told all we need is our Bible. We don't need any church normative authority or interpretation. As long as we have our Bible, we can dictate what the truth means. It's not until you peel back the layers, it's not until you take time to read up on the different ecumenical counselors, read up on what the early church fathers thought on the Holy Eucharist, on baptismal regeneration, on the canon of Scripture that Protestants hold so closely to. None of that sticks if you don't accept the normative authority of the church. But it's funny that even Tim is like, now you're Orthodox. But that was a great question by Jay.
Could you name anybody that believed that about the nature of the church?
I don't know that I would agree that it was necessarily divided into several sects, and I don't know that my church would agree with that either. I think.
Well, don't you agree with the idea that Protestants are trying their best, and whether they're Methodist or whether they're Anglican doesn't really matter?
No, I would say that there are Protestant sects that are more
Is the
properly
church
Christian
divided
than
amongst
others.
those branches?
Today, yes.
Okay. Did anyone in those 7 councils have that idea about the nature of the church?
No, but I also don't think that
So your church is not in communion with those ideas of the 7.
my church is not in communion with the Anglican Communion. We're not Anglicans. We're Anglican Catholics. We hold ourselves.
I'm asking you about the first 1,000 years
Yes.
of Christianity.
Yes,
but you have a.
we are in agreement with all 7
No,
ecumenical
you're
councils.
not, because you couldn't name anybody that had your ecclesiology of those.
I don't think we're
It's a
having
big
the same.
word.
I don't think we're having the same conversation.
Well, maybe you should get on this conversation and answer the
I'm-
question, because that's what we're doing here today.
I can't lie. That's what I love about Jay. And, you know, if you look at any Jay Dyer video, you're going to constantly get people in the comments that are shocked, that are like, how can you talk to people like this and claim to be a Christian? You're not kind. Ultimately, just things to redirect from the truth. Aiden's not a dumb guy, and Jay knows that. So he's telling him, hey, basically, you know the question I'm asking you. Were any of the church fathers, any of them at the Seventh Ecumenical Council, Anglicans, or viewed the church as you do in modern day? And Aiden knows the answer to that. You can see him tiptoeing around. And Jay's like, no, like, we're having that conversation. It's something that needs to be addressed.
The terminology you're using is confusing to me.
Is common.
Yeah,
It's
no,
natural. The ecclesiology that the people the first 1,000 years had,
yeah.
did any one of them have a branch theory or that the church is divided amongst a bunch of groups?
Again, I don't think we're having the same conversation.
So you can't
I
answer
think
the
we got off base at a certain point here.
Does your ecclesiology have any basis in the first 1,000 years?
Yes, we trace all of our ecclesiology back to the first 1,000 years.
Name a church father or a council that has your branch theory view of the church.
I think branch theory is where we're having a disagreement here. I've
Whatever
never
you
heard
wanna
that
call it.
term before.
It's a classic Anglican term for the nature of the church. That's how they.
Again, Jay already explained. He claimed he already did not know what the branch theory was. Jay clearly explained it. And now he's referring back to, I don't know what branch theory is, rather than addressing the arguments. And again, Aiden's not a dumb guy. Even though he's a Protestant, he probably knows, just from things he was saying earlier in the episode, he understands that there were ecumenical councils. He probably knows more about church history than 90+% of Protestants. So I view this more as like he's on the defense and it's dodge time at this point for him.
How they justified their Reformation position. So tell me one church father or council that has that position about the church. It's a very simple question.
I off the top of my head, I can't.
So it's ahistorical. That's
Off the top of my head, I can't give you an answer to the
not
question.
in it.
What Jay's
Yeah, there you go. At least he seeded that. But also it's like, why are we getting this far without asking these questions? And again, as someone that comes from a Protestant background, I did the same exact thing. But how long are we going to let this continue? Why are we not having these conversations earlier? Why are we not looking at the history of the church? And look at Jay. He's like, no answer? Okay, yeah. He's not surprised. Jay used to be an Anglican. Like, he understands the position.
He's asking him for people out there listening about ahistorical. When a Protestant claims that I'm with the church, I was with the church, the same.
By the way, this is Tim Gordon. He is the defender of Catholicism on the panel. Him and Jay were going back and forth earlier. I am not an expert on particularly all the details and intricacies of the papacy and church history in that regard. So we're starting pretty well in and just reacting to the portion regarding with Aiden and the Protestantism defense position.
The same way that the Orthodox were until 1054. Set aside who excommunicated whom for a second. They might agree in abstracto, which is why I called it abstract Enlightenment rationalism. They might agree in abstracto with what was going on, with the Orthodox or with the Catholics. They're always going to favor the Orthodox because none of these groups like the Pope or the unity required by a papacy. But what Jay was asking here is, for it to be true Christianity, true Christianity in its truest sense, it's got to be one holy Catholic and apostolic. The problem for the one mark and the Catholic mark for Orthodox, but Orthodox are actually Christian insofar as they have the 7 sacraments, and all of their bishops can be traced back to one of the apostles. That's what he was asking about ecclesiology. So when they say, "Oh, I agree with this," but no Protestant has the 7 sacraments or a bishop.
We have the 7 sacraments and we have bishops.
I'm gonna get very reductive and simple.
You have the 7 sacraments. Okay. I don't know specifically enough about Methodist, Anglican theology to refute that. But how can you say you have the episcopate or the apostolic succession? You already essentially granted that you can't think of a single church father at the Seventh Ecumenical Council that had a Protestant POV or was a Protestant or an Anglican. That doesn't even make sense.
Simplify everything to a ridiculous degree and ask questions that maybe are ridiculously rudimentary for the average Christian. Do you guys all like when it comes to like Mosaic law, laws of Leviticus? Do you all follow those, or are they considered archaic? How does the Old Testament play a role in how you live your lives and what rules you follow?
We're under the new covenant.
So what does that mean? I just don't know. Like the New Testament,
Anyone catch that? I'm sorry. So Aiden jumps in and says we're under the new covenant, which is true. And then Tim's just asking, hey, like, yeah, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? And what's Aiden doing? He's looking at Tim Gordon and Jay Dyer for answers, as if they're gonna come to rescue and defend his position.
So the laws of Leviticus don't apply? Or...
Yeah, the laws of Leviticus are specifically made for a very specific period in Jewish history. And Jesus does not come to erase the law. He comes to fulfill the law. So his position in the hierarchy is not as somebody who washes things away. It's somebody who fulfills it. The law was basically a series of things that Jews had to do to stay in communion with God. Christ gives us a different set of rules. That doesn't mean we ignore everything, but it means we take his authority over the old law.
So does that mean that when it comes to all of the Old Testament's rules, are there some that remain based on Jesus said outright, these are still to remain and these are not to remain? Sure. How do you, and this is not a question, how do you know which, I don't imagine that Jesus addressed literally every single rule or law. How do you know which ones to...
I don't know enough about Tim Pool's background, but can anyone tell what we're getting at here? It's going to start pointing towards what? Church tradition. 2 Thessalonians 3:15, passing down of both oral and written traditions. Things that ultimately defeat sola scriptura.
Probably one way we disagree with him is to a degree, not totally, but I mean, Orthodox and Catholics agree that there is an oral tradition that's passed down from the apostles. So you have what's the written text of the New Testament, which the early church didn't have a Bible. They had some documents, they had some letters, and they had tradition, and they had the church service. So everything was kind of done in a liturgical service way. You would be getting catechized orally, and then eventually the Bible gets collected in later centuries to be the canon. But so basically tradition and the Bible lets you know what things carry over and what don't. And that's one of the reasons why the councils have church law. So church law kind of helps interpret that.
So I have a question. I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, but how do you all view Hutterites? Is it the word?
Oh, you mean Anabaptists? Like, yeah.
Yeah. How do y'all view them? Are they
We would say they're heterodox, yeah.
They're outside of the... Yeah. And I think you guys would all agree. It's like it's like a different
Amish, yeah.
So this is going to be a kindergartner level, urban liberals argument for the Christians right now when I say this, but is it not one of the instructions of God to be fruitful and multiply?
Yes.
Sure.
So we're having a conversation over what is the superior denomination. Well, I just looked it up. I don't think Mormons count. No offense to Mormons, but I think for the purpose of this debate, Mormons are a different area, right?
Mormons are non-Trinitarian. They don't believe in the same God that we do.
Pentecostals have a 2.1 fertility rate, and Hutterites...
That was actually a good point by Aiden. Quick, easy distinction.
Have 6 to 7 fertility rate.
Jeez.
After that, conservative Protestants 1.8, Catholics 1.9, Orthodox 1.9, Jehovah's Witness slightly less than 2, Protestants 1.5 to 1.6, liberal Protestants 1.5, and unaffiliated Christians 1.3 to 1.8. So the Pentecostals and Hutterites, according to just a cursory search, are the only actual groups that are being fruitful and multiplying. And that's, to be honest, only the Hutterites, the Amish, Anabaptists, Everybody else ain't having kids.
I think traditional Catholics are having kids.
Just a cursory search, it is around 1.92. I thought it was a little higher than that.
There's not much of a difference between our three sects.
Y'all ain't having kids.
Well, if you
Y'all
go,
are supposed to be
if you go
fruitful
to
and
the,
multiply.
if you
What are you
go
doing?
to the Tridentine Latin Mass, it's a very different group. And
I'm going to ask ChatGPT this.
Well, what do we talk about a lot? We talk about kind of just the effects of the biggest social revolution of the last century, which is feminism. When we're pushing propaganda and pushing for women to not pursue traditional values and pursue further education, pursue career, which is fine. What's the trade-off with that? The trade-off for most women is that they're not settling down. They're not getting married until later. And by the time you're 30, 31, 32, the window for you to reproduce and multiply, we'll say, just on the terminology we've been using, it's going to shrink. I guess the window you have to do that, at least in a healthy and optimal way. And we can have a separate. I mean, I don't even think we need to necessarily have a separate debate or much dialogue on the fact that Protestantism as a whole has been infiltrated by feminism more than any other sect. I mean, yes, obviously there's the case and the arguments that the Roman Catholics are corrupt and they allow certain things, but in general, and just in the West as a whole, it's not surprising why all three denominations are below replacement.
it's going to be above
They
replacement.
I do
well
really
above
quickly,
replacement.
while he's doing that, I want to come back because I
Multiply.
had an opportunity to sit down and think about the branch theory thing. Do you not have a Russian Orthodox, a Greek Orthodox, an Orthodox Church in America?
Those are not branches. It's not at all the same ecclesiology of Anglican branch theory.
Well, first of all, I would point out that branch theory is not dogmatic. But
I was just looking for whatever was.
I know,
closest
but
to your
the Anglican position is that we were part of the one true Holy Apostolic Catholic Church, and
now
then
you're not.
and then that church,
What's dogma in your church? How do you determine that?
the same way that Catholics and Orthodox do.
No,
That's
that's
not
very different.
But we don't have
That's
we,
very
we
different.
no longer have a pope, but we
You're
do
a
have
Protestant, so
councils of bishops.
So how do you determine the dogma?
We have councils of bishops.
Okay, but what's a dogma? Like, do you accept icons?
No. Well, yes, we were not iconoclasts.
Well, but is it a dogma or is it an opinion? Because
We
most
hold the same position as the Roman Catholic Church.
no, you don't,
Yes.
because Orthodox and Roman Catholics excommunicate people that don't believe in imagery, and most Protestants historically have allowed it to be something that's an opinion. Adiaphora.
There is a lot of pious opinion in.
So is it a dogma or not? That's the question.
I'm not sure exactly with
Okay,
icons.
so,
I don't believe that
so
we.
a lot of the
I don't believe we
basics-
excommunicate people for thinking that
Right.
icons.
So
are
it's
bad.
not a dogma, and thus many of the basics are not actually settled in your
If
position.
it depends on if we're in again, I'm not as well versed on the specifics of the councils, but if it's in this first 7 councils, we're in the same we're of the same opinion.
But the problem with your ecclesiology is that when there are no leaders, right? I mean,
We have bishops, we have archbishops. I don't know why we keep coming
no
back. to
bishops that can trace their lineage
Yes,
all the
we
way
do.
back to one.
We
of
can
the
trace
12
back
apostles.
to
That's not
Augustine
true.
of Britain, and we can trace back
Literally.
Trace back to Augustine. The entire inherent value of apostolic succession is that it can trace directly back to Christ.
Literally,
Aristobulus.
Orthodox and Roman Catholics.
Our
have-
bishops trace back to the 1st century AD in Britain.
Okay, wait,
Yeah,
that's a
but
broken.
If you have a
lineage.
totally different,
According to your
if you have a totally different,
No, it's not a broken lineage. The church remained in Britain even after the Saxons got
You're
there.
identifying as an Anglican Catholic today?
Yes.
Or you're identifying as a Methodist?
I'm identifying as a
Or as
Methodist who is inquiring into the Anglican Catholic Church
All
and
right,
is getting
so you
confirmed
got-
later this year.
I mean, this is part of the problem. No, that's
I-
good.
No, right now we're having a
that's a
historical
step in the
discussion.
right-
I
that is
am
a
a
correction.
historian, but we're having a conversation about history right now. So your church,
Well, you already just referred back to you not understanding the history, the details of what was discussed at the ecumenical councils. You've already fallen back on that, but now you're a historian.
church recognizes Aristobulus of Britain. Your church recognizes Aristobulus.
You're a
of
historian, but you didn't know about the branch theory, which is like the number one.
I'm not a religious historian. I'm a historian.
Okay.
I'm a medieval historian specifically.
Excuse me.
When we're looking at this, Aristobulus is the earliest we can go back with the Anglican Catholic Church because of the union between the churches in Kent and the churches
assuming
in
your
Scotia.
ecclesiology.
No, I'm not.
You are.
No, that's fair. It's just you're not
both
a
acknowledge
faithful
we don't.
representative of
Both of your
don't.
churches acknowledge Aristobulus.
No, we don't. We don't acknowledge your ecclesiology. You understand that from the Orthodox perspective, it doesn't matter if you have a laying on of hands.
Is Augustine legitimate?
If you leave the faith of the church, none of that from the Orthodox perspective even matters.
We didn't leave the faith of the church. The Roman Catholic Church left us. That's our position.
I know your position. I'm saying from our position, our ecclesiology doesn't recognize your ecclesiology, nor does his. They think that Anglican orders are invalid via Leo XIII.
That's because that's what's convenient to their theology. It doesn't actually have any sort of.
I'm
basis
saying
in
that
reality.
neither of us recognizes your lineage, and I understand that you think that it's there, but that's why I was
It is there. We can trace it all the way back to
only on the basis of your ecclesiology and presupposing the Protestant lineage.
We have an ordination that goes back
on
to
the
Augustine.
basis of your ecclesiology.
You understand? People out there need to understand that they're
Yeah, he's not understanding that it's when Jay's saying it's based on his ecclesiology, it's essentially just based on the Anglican, Methodist, or whichever denomination he is that views them as legitimate. Both Eastern Orthodox and, Orthodox as a whole and Roman Catholics do not view the Anglican bishops as a part of or in communion with the true line of apostolic succession, which leads back to Christ.
there is such a thing as apostolic sacramental Christianity. The Roman Catholic Church has Ratzinger wrote on this in 2004 and in the 90s.
I'm going to stop it there. But thank you very much for watching. This was a fun little section to get to break down. I hope that you guys enjoyed this breakdown. I probably will possibly post a few more clips of just different parts of this conversation, but I was excited when I got on YouTube this morning and saw that Tim Pool had a live episode with Jay DYER and a Roman Catholic on it. So if you haven't yet, definitely check out the entire episode at the on Tim Pool's channel. If you're new to this channel, which you probably are because this is my first video, please make sure to like and subscribe. I will be shouting out, maybe doing some type of a giveaway for my very first subscriber, because this is just out of the blue from nowhere. But I am excited to, bring videos and continue to get feedback. So without further ado, thanks for watching, like, subscribe, and have a blessed day.